Welcome back, fellow slave narrative lovers. Today I'm reading the narrative of Moses Roper, and it was published in 1840. I'll begin. I was born in North Carolina in Caswell County. I'm not able to tell in what month or year. What I shall relate is what was told me by my mother and grandmother. A few months before I was born, my father married my mother's young mistress. As soon as my father's wife heard of my birth, she sent one of my mother's sisters to see whether I was white or black. And when my aunt had seen me, she returned back as soon as she could and told her mistress that I was white and resembled Mr. Roper very much. So the father was the white man. Mr. Roper's wife, not being pleased with this report, she got a large club stick and knife and hastened to the place in which my mother was confined. She went into my mother's room with a full intention to murder me with a knife and club. But as she was going to stick the knife into me, my grandmother, happening to come in, caught the knife and saved my life. But as well as I can recollect from what my mother told me, my father sold her and myself soon after her confinement, that is, after giving birth. I cannot recollect anything that is worth notice till I was 6 or 7 years of age. My mother being half white and my father a white man, I was at that time very white. Soon after I was 6 or 7 years of age, my mother's old master died, that is, my father's wife's father. All his slaves had to be divided among his children. Of my father disposing of me, I'm not sure whether he exchanged me and my mother for another slave or not, but think it very likely that he did exchange me with one of his wife's brothers or sisters, because I remember when my mother's old master died, I was living with my father's wife's brother-in-law, whose name was Mr. Durham. My mother was drawn with the other slaves. You'll soon understand what drawn means. The way they divide their slaves is this. They write the names of different slaves on a small piece of paper and put it into a box and let them all draw. I think that Mr. Durham drew my mother and Mr. Fowler drew me, so we were separated a considerable distance. So not with the humanity of letting a mother stay with her child, then just draw lots like they're not humans. I cannot say how far. My resembling my father so much and being whiter than other slaves caused me soon to be sold to what they call a Negro trader, who sold me to the southern states of America, several hundred miles from my mother. Child abuse, right? As well as I can recollect, I was then about 6 years old. The trader, Mr. Mitchell, after traveling several hundred miles and selling a good many of his slaves, found he could not sell me very well, as I was so much whiter than other slaves were. For he had been trying several months, left me with a Mr. Sneed, who kept a large boarding house, who took me to wait at table and sell me if he could. I think I stayed with Mr. Sneed about a year, but he could not sell me. When Mr. Mitchell had sold his slaves, he went to the north and brought up another lot of enslaved people, calling it a drove, and returned to the south with them, and sent his son-in-law into Washington in Georgia after me. So he came and took me from Mr. Sneed and met his father-in-law with me in a town called Lancaster, and with his drove of slaves. We stayed in Lancaster a week because it was a court week, and there was a great many people there, and it was a good opportunity for selling the slaves. And there he was enabled to sell me to a gentleman, Dr. Jones, who was both a doctor and a cotton planter. He took me into his shop to beat up and mix medicine, which was not a very hard employment. But I did not keep it long, as the doctor soon sent me to his cotton plantation, that I may be burnt darker by the sun. It was too light, too confusing. He sent me to be with a tailor to learn the trade, but the journeymen being white men, Mr. Bryant the tailor did not let me work in the shop. I cannot say whether it was the prejudice of the men in not wanting me to sit in the shop with them, or whether Mr. Bryant wanted to keep me about the house to do the housework instead of teaching me the trade. After several months, my master came to know how I got on with the trade. I was not able to tell Mr. Bryant's answer, but it was either that I could not learn, or that his journeymen were unwilling that I should sit in the shop with them. I was only once in the shop all the time I was there, and then only for an hour or two before his wife called me out to do some other work. So my master took me home, and as he was going to send a load of cotton to Camden, about 40 miles distance, he sent me with the bales of cotton to be sold with it, where I was sold to a gentleman named Allen. But Mr. Allen soon exchanged me for a female slave to please his wife. The traders who bought me were named Cooper and Lindsay, who took me for sale but could not sell me, people objecting to me being rather white. They took me to the city of Fayetteville, North Carolina, where he swapped me for a boy that was darker than me, to Mr. Smith, who lived several miles off. I was with Mr. Smith nearly a year. I arrived at the first knowledge of my age when I lived there. I was then between 12 and 13 years old. It was when President Jackson was elected the first time, and he has been president 8 years ago. So I must be nearly 21 years of age. At this time I was quite a small boy, and was sold to Mr. Hodge, a Negro trader. Here I began to enter into hardship. And I'll stop there. But you see how goes it. So no care for this child just going from place to place, and the difficulties of being sold because of his complexion. Thanks so much for listening.